the Prophet. My name is Pastor Emmanuel Renee. I have to my left.
Minister Cade.
And to my left.
Minister Keith Dawkins.
Praise the Lord. We've been talking about the power of worship.
Yes.
And today we're going to talk about worship will bring God into your situation. A lot of times God don't come in because you don't invite him in. We invite everybody else into our situation. We invite people, things, and situation. But we need to understand that when we worship, God begins to come in into the into our situation. That worship is the signal. You know how somebody is stranded in an island and they put a flare up to let them people know where they at and what's going on. Well, worship is the flare that you put up to God to let him know what you are. And sometimes you may not have a chance to pray yet. To tell God about what's going on. To tell God about the situation. But when you worship him, and I think that the Bible talk about about worship when they sacrifice unto the Lord, that he said it was like a sweet smelling savor unto him. And I believe that worship is like a smelling, a favor, that the signal and the smell of that thing tells God what the condition is. To come quickly about me, to come quickly and deal with my situation. I don't have no time. That's when we talk about shabbaking before the Lord. Shabbaking is that I have too much emotional thing that's inside my soul, that's inside my spirit, that's inside my being, that I no longer have words to describe what I'm feeling. I don't have words to describe what's in my soul. I don't have words to describe what I'm thinking. My mind is blank. My mind is everything. But guess what? But when I groan, when I shabbat unto the Lord, the sound that I make brings certain things to let God knows everything that I'm dealing with, everything that's going on. Now, when you look at a mother, right? When a baby cries, the baby can't talk. But the cry of the baby at certain times allow the mother to know what the condition is. And some people who don't have intimacy with the baby, when the baby cried, they don't understand why the baby's crying. Nobody here. You don't understand why the baby crying. But because the baby have developed a relationship with the mother, so when that baby cried, he said, oh no, there's nothing wrong. They just need their diaper change. Nobody here. And there's another cry that says that, they just need their milk. And there's another cry that goes on and say, guess what? They need some sleep. And there's another cry that says, hold up, something going on. Because this cry doesn't sound like the other fourth cry. But this must be a bellyache. But we have different cries. Every children is crying to God in different ways. And God knows by the amount of worship that's going on to understand what it is that's going on without you even telling them. But there's a praise to him. There's a worship. And he said, hold up, they worship me. But there's something in the worship they're worshiping me. There's something that make me come down to check on their condition. Because you can worship in pain and you can worship in distress. You can worship in joy. But worship have different dimension to it. But God is the one that decipher the worship and the praise and see about your condition.
Yes, God.
Right, that say, I cry unto the Lord. He first starts saying that God is my strength and God is my rock and God is my refuge and God is my fortress. I trust him. Then he talks about that how hell is all around him. The atmosphere of spiritual warfare is strong. Then we left it off with that God began to see about him and God heard the worship and God began to come down. So when you worship in God, it allows God to come in your situation. And verse 8 said that, right? Then smoke went up from his nostril and fire from his mouth devoured, coals were kindled by it. He bowed the heavens also and came down, and thick darkness was under his feet. And he rode upon a cherub storm and flew, and he sped on the wings of the wind. My God, and he made darkness his hiding place, covering his pavilion canopy around him. The darkness of the waters, the thick cloud of the skies. Out of the brightness before him passed his thick clouds, hailstones and coals of fire. The Lord also thundered in the heaven, and the Most High uttered his voice, hailstone and coalstone of fire. And can I tell you something? When God showed up, it may not look like God. When God shows up,
Wow.
you have to understand, it's like earthquake. It's like a storm.
Wow.
Yes, yes.
It's like something. But God is in the thick clouds, hiding himself. Because you can't see him. I got to hide who I am. Because if you see my
Oh,
glory,
wow.
you won't live. So I come in a canopy of darkness and I got to hide myself. But if you don't know, have a relationship with him, you won't recognize he's in the storm.
Oh my God.
You won't recognize he's in the darkness and he's hiding in it. Because it may not look like God has shown up. But God has shown up. But he has to disguise himself in something else to show up to you.
Wow.
Nobody hearing me. He has to disguise himself. Because if he
Wow.
come as he is, but he got to hide. A lot of times God shows up, we don't detect that's God.
Wow.
When God, a lot of times God shows up the answer, you don't want to listen to it because you say don't look like God. But it is God that showed up in the answer to show you what's going on. Let you say something.
That one blew my mind.
Let you say something.
That one completely blew my
glory,
mind. Like in the midst of it, like God disguised himself in everything, and it's like the way that you would expect him to come. He doesn't show up in that way, but it didn't mean that he didn't answer. He answered you, but he's showing himself. He's manifesting himself in a way that it would be undetected to any enemy that's around, but that
that's
you
it.
would know because of the intimacy of the relationship that you have through worship. That you would know that it was God showing up
Oh
in
yeah,
the midst of you.
you in it. That's it. That's
Oh
it.
wow.
But that's the key, the intimacy, the connection. You gotta have a connection with God. You always gotta worship God. You always gotta invite God into your worship. No matter what you're going through, no matter your situation, good, bad, or whatever, don't matter. You always gotta worship because that worship allow God to come inside, and God would say, okay, that's my son, that's my daughter. He'll tap in. That's why you gotta always worship God in spirit and truth. No matter what you're going through, no matter what the situation, you gotta have an intimacy, that relationship, that fellowship, that connection at all times. Oh man.
See,
This is so good.
this guy called God.
Too much.
He called God. And you have to understand that this God that he called can be fearful of him because he may not come the way you think. But when God showed up, he showed up for war. And he uses the environment that you in to cover himself to fight your enemies. You better hear him. He's answering to enemies. When a guy's going to war, if he's going to fight in the jungle or despite the area he's fighting, he camouflages himself. He put his wall
The
pit on.
surroundings, yes. Oh
He
my
take the
God.
surrounding. But God take his own surrounding, which is the heavens and the clouds
Yes.
and the wind. He wrapped himself around
Yes,
it,
yes,
put
yes,
it on his
yes.
face because he's ready for
Yes.
warfare with the
God,
enemy.
God.
He's ready
good.
to destroy your enemies.
My
He's
God.
ready to take care of your enemies. And that's why he hide himself
Wow.
in a pavilion
Jesus.
that you may not understand it. Because, you know, when I see the pictures of Vietnam, and when they used to go fight the Viet Congs, and you see they put the green mask, they didn't look. So when they go into the green jungle, they match with the jungle. Or a hunter, he take the surrounding of the area where the thing he's hunting and the thing he hunting up. So he stay there so the enemy won't see him, but he see the enemy. So the thing, when God shows up, the things that used to hunt you, God begin to hunt it. Nobody
That's
here.
good.
Okay. Nobody. When
Wow.
you worship, you release
Lord have
God
mercy.
into the situation. The spiritual warfare that used to haunt you, now God begin to put it in his target and begin to hunt it.
Yes, Lord.
So when you worship, you release
Thank
God.
you, God.
When you worship, you release God into your situation. You release God because this guy couldn't fight for himself. But God will fight for him because he released God with his worship. He said, I trust you,
Oh, thank you.
and I believe you, and I trust in you. Because it was not, if it was another human being he was fighting, it'd be different. It was spiritual warfare from demonic forces that had greater thing than him. So now he called God, who's greater than any spirits, and release him to worship, to come in my condition. So this is the point now. When I worship God, right, the hunter becomes the hunted. So far,
My
scripture.
God.
My name is Pastor Emmanuel Renee.
Minister Cave.
Minister Keep Dog.
We have one thing to say to you.
Jesus is Lord.
God bless you.